If the president declines to leave voluntarily, then he's going to be our nominee, and we have to make the best of a complicated situation.
President Biden is the nominee, and we support the Democratic nominee that will be Donald Trump. I don't want Donald Trump on the public tour of the White House.
I think we would be less endangered of a Trump presidency if we had a different candidate.
As I've said before, I'm with Joe.
Is U.S. President Joe Biden fit to govern? That remains the #1 question in Washington. But Democrats on Capitol Hill today are divided over the fate of Biden's 2024 candidacy. A busy day for Biden as he tries to convince those colleagues he can win the election and lead the nation for another 4 years. This morning, he met with top Democrats behind closed doors, and just last hour, he kicked off the NATO summit with an address. Now, we spoke with Semafor's political reporter, Kadia Goba, before the speech, and she's back with me now. So, Kadia, every public appearance of the president is a bit of a high-wire act. I mean, I don't know if Democrats are reacting to what they just saw just yet, but what's your assessment of the president's performance and what the reaction might be?
You're exactly right. Every performance or every appearance Joe Biden makes is going to be crucial. He definitely looked much stronger than he did at the debate. He sounded stronger than he at the NATO speech just now than he did calling into Morning Joe the other day. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not, Democrats on the Hill are receptive to this stronger Joe Biden. I have to add that is just not the case for some of them. They want their constituents to affirm that as well. It's not about them personally. They say they want to hear assurances from their constituents on the ground. So
just as a final point, I mean, that was a scripted speech, with teleprompters. We could see those there. And I use a teleprompter right now, so there's no judgment in that. But the test for a lot of people has been an unscripted event like the news conference that's coming later this week. But you heard the clip pack that we played coming in there. These are Democrats saying he's the nominee, and if he won't leave willingly, we'll have to make the best of it. And he's the nominee. We support the nominee. Sort of technical expressions of support rather than affectionate expressions of support. How do we interpret all of that? Could you?
I would agree. Leaving the press conference today, many Democrats just echoed the same sentiment. He is our Democratic nominee, period. No points of affirmation or anything like that. I think Thursday will be another defining factor for him. I think, at this press conference, seeing whether or not he can make some assurances for people on the ground will then impact how members are feeling about this. But right now, as of just an hour ago, we had another member come out opposing him, saying that he should drop out of the race.
Okay, Semafor's Kadia Goba, we appreciate you being with us throughout the show tonight. We'll talk to you again soon, I am sure. We're going to have more coverage now on the questions about Biden's leadership. Howard Dean is the former governor of Vermont and the former chair of the Democratic National Committee, and he joins me now live. Mr. Dean, it's good to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Interesting times in Democratic politics.
Yes.
What did you make of what all the Democratic lawmakers had to say today after they met?
Look, I can give you my issue on this. I think there's no question that Biden's capable of leading the country for another 4 years. Does he get confused? Yes. Is he 81 years old? Yes. First of all, he's running against a convicted felon who's a lunatic. So, I mean, the idea that Trump is going to run the country and do something helpful is ridiculous. Second of all, I have no doubt that with his outstanding staff, he had a great first term, and I think he can run the country. That is not the issue. That's what the press is talking about. I have no doubt he can run the country. The question is, can he beat can he beat Trump? That is what people are worried about. And the polls have looked bad in the last few. I thought this was all going to go away after 10 days. And it was off to the races. That's not true. So now we have to see. So I think the jury's still out. But again, I have no doubt he can run the country, and certainly a lot better than Donald Trump. The question is, can he get elected? And the polls have looked a little shaky, and I don't think we're at the end of this yet. I think we've got to see how these polls are going to look and how Kamala Harris, who would be the nominee if he weren't, I suspect, can do against Trump.
I mean, what you've articulated is sort of the theory that Ezra Klein from the New York Times put out in February, right? That Joe Biden has the judgment, the experience, and the team and the ability to be president, but does he have the endurance and the capacity to win a campaign against a guy like Trump. For all of the many things about Donald Trump, voters are anxious about Joe Biden. So how does this play out when, today another Democratic lawmaker came out that's 7 now in the House of Representatives, said he's got to go. How does he put a lid on all of this?
Well, given that there are 200 members of the Democratic Party in the House, I wouldn't worry about 7 Democrats saying whatever they say. This is all media grist and fun and games. The real question is what the American people think. And I'm not going to argue that it's fair, because I have no doubt that he has the capacity to run the country for another 4 years. But politics isn't fair. So I think the real test, as I said before, is can he beat Trump, this convicted felon who's getting a free pass right now because politics isn't fair. That's the decision that he has to make. And I suspect they'll take this for another week or so, and then they'll be looking at the polls, which have not looked as good as I would like them to look in places like Pennsylvania, and then they'll make a decision.
You're a former head of the DNC, right? What happens if they wait another 7 to 10 days? Because you got the convention in about 40 days, 38 days? I mean, how does the calendar and the political cycle, how do those two intersect in this, Mr. Dean?
It does. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. The only way that Joe Biden doesn't run is if Joe Biden decides he shouldn't run for the benefit of the country, if he thinks that's for the benefit of the country. There's no mechanism to remove him right now. And it's also, I know there's a lot of talk about primaries and all this, fast, instant runoff voting and all that. It's either going to be Biden or it's going to be Harris. If Biden says no, then he'll probably anoint Harris, and Harris has all the tools ready to go because she is, she's already on the ticket, and she has control over the resources and so forth and so on. If somebody else tries to make a play, if Biden decides not to run, I think they're going to lose, and B, the mechanics are more complicated. They're not impossible, but they're more complicated. It involves super PACs and giving all the money to the DNC and then running the campaign out of the DNC, all of which is possible, but there's some legal impediments to that, which I'm sure can be gotten over.
What do you think he's going to do? I mean, he's made it very clear he's staying, and his whole life he's been sort of working towards this moment, and he beat Donald Trump last time, and he's never really lost, as he says. But the opposition is there, and the stakes are high. Should Donald Trump win, if down-ballot races go Republican, Senate, House, with the Supreme Court the way it is, what do you think Joe Biden's going to do?
He's lost. I have no idea what he's going to do. He's lost twice before. I don't know why you say he's never lost.
Sorry, he says he's never lost. So I was quoting the president. But anyway, go ahead, sir.
Well, he's never lost to Donald Trump, that's for sure. Well, I think that's what people are really worried about. If this was George W. Bush, much as we disagree with his politics, he's not a nutcase. And the Republican Party is not really a political party anymore. It's a group of right-wing autocrats and complemented by people who are afraid of the right-wing autocrats. So they're pretty useless. I mean, they can't run anything. I think it'll be particularly difficult for Canada if Trump wins again. Because the Canadian economy is so tied to the American economy. And if you have a lunatic running the American economy, that's not going to be so good for the Canadians. So there's a huge stake there, I think, north of the border. But it's really a major problem. We have not had somebody this incompetent and this much of a liar, nor have we had a convicted felon ever in the White House before. So the stakes are truly enormous. And I think if you're a thoughtful person, you're going to vote for Biden. But there are a lot of things in politics that aren't about thoughtfulness. It's about connection. It's about who you like. It's, et cetera, et cetera. So I have no way of predicting, and this is really in Joe Biden's hands.
If he were to call you, Mr. Dean, what would you tell him to do? What would your advice to Joe Biden be?
First of all, I wouldn't give him advice. I'd want to know a lot of facts that I don't know. I'd want to know what the polling looks like. I saw some polling this morning that showed that Harris outpolled Biden in Pennsylvania, which is a key state. Well, I don't really trust polls, but if there were 15 polls like that, that would influence what I thought. But there are plenty of people who are close to Biden around him that can tell him that in the morning and every morning, any morning, that there are polls coming in. So I have no idea what he's going to do. He says he's staying. I think that's for now, that's absolutely true. And I think we've got a little bit of time before he has to make up his mind.
You've campaigned in the past. I mean, we just watched him. We carried it live. His speech to NATO, a scripted speech on a teleprompter, which wouldn't be a newsworthy event in most news cycles. But everything right now is a high-wire act with this president. I mean, how is that tenable for a campaign until November 5th?
That's what the problem is. The problem is high-wire act, schmire act. This guy's a competent guy. Does he have some forgetfulness? Yes. Does he have some cognitive issues? Yes. He's a competent person who knows this job, and he's got really qualified people around him, and he's had a great 4 years, probably the best domestic agenda we've had since, and that it was completed since Lyndon Johnson. So he is clearly qualified. The unfairness of this all is people are looking at this and making judgments about him that they're not qualified to make. But that's what happens in a democracy. As Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for every other. And the final vote is with the people of the United States, and that's what they have to take into account, given the danger of a loss to a madman who's a convicted felon.
Look, I take your point on the unfairness of it, and in particular on the media point of it, that the concerns about what has been a successful first-term presidency, the age of the incumbent versus all of the other things that come with his opponent. But, it is because I think the stakes on the other side and the anxiety that just ordinary Americans are having, that makes it such a situation. So, like, how do you campaign for the next 4 months knowing that dynamic is out there with American voters?
That's what that's the decision you have to make. You have to decide whether this is going to go away. I thought it was going to go away in 10 days. I was wrong. And you have to decide now whether this is going to go away in a timely way, or whether it isn't, and whether this sort of angst about all this stuff that I think is window dressing, to be honest with you. I think the guy is clearly capable, and whether this angst is going to last, because if it does last, we're not going to win. And he just has to power through that, and that's a judgment only he can make, along with the people around him.
He hasn't done a press conference since the debate. He's done a couple of interviews and media interviews. And just as a final point, his staff point to the fact that he's going to have a press conference at the end of the NATO summit on Thursday, and they say that will be an important moment for him. What do you think he needs to do on Thursday? What are you watching for when the president does this later this week?
I'm just watching for a press conference where he can answer the questions, which he certainly is capable of doing, and doesn't get distracted. But the thing is, this is totally unfair. If you're any good at a press conference, does that qualify you to be president of the United States? No. You have to be good behind the scenes in the Oval Office, and particularly Biden's strength is being good with foreign relations. For him to tell the Israelis that they have to have a two-state solution, I don't know if another president would have said that, and he's right. And so this is a guy who understands foreign policy and is willing to do something about it, where many other presidents have not. I like that, because I think that's leadership. So he's going to get judged. He is being judged now on something that has very little to do with whether he can be a good president or not. But elections matter, and all of this stuff doesn't do any good unless you can win the election. And that, for me, is the core issue. Can he win the election? And I don't know yet if he can or not. Do I think he deserves to? Yes, based on his record, and of course based on the whack job that he's running against.
Howard Dean, it was really good to meet you, and I appreciate everything you brought to the show tonight. We hope you come back. That's former Governor Howard Dean. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
The White House is continuing to do damage control, insisting that Biden will be on the ballot in November.
You're going to have some congressional members who feel differently. That is up to them, right? The president wants to continue. He's going to have those conversations. He's going to engage with congressional members. He's going to continue to do that as he has. That's not going to stop.
Antoine Seawright is a Democratic political strategist, and Aaron Regenberg is a former Democratic state representative and an organizer of the group Pass the Torch Biden. Gentlemen, it's good to meet you both. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Antoine, I wonder if I could start with you. We just talked to Howard Dean, the former head of the DNC, and he said this is all very unfair, conceding that politics is unfair. Joe Biden can do the job. The question is whether he can win the election, and there's a lot of nonsense going on right now. Well, what are your thoughts on what Howard Dean had to say?
Well, I agree with that. There's certainly a lot of noise out there, but politics is a contact sport, and sometimes the greatest hits come from those who have on the same jersey as you. I think Joe Biden is experiencing that in many ways, shapes, forms, and sizes, if you will. But at the end of the day, what has been clear through all of this is that there are a few who publicly have called for him to step aside. Many have concerns, but by and large, the majority of the base of our party is riding with Biden. Those are African-American voters. And I think that's what matters. Not those on K Street, but those on our street and Main Street, because that is the place, and the place is where elections are decided.
So, Aaron, your group is called Pass the Torch Biden, which I think we can decipher as meaning you think it's time for him to hand this off to someone else. Did Howard Dean convince you otherwise? What do you make of what we've seen today from Democratic politicians?
Well, speaking of the majority of Democratic voters, all the polls I've seen is that most voters are terrified about Biden's ability to defeat Donald Trump and want to see him step aside and pass the torch to one of the many talented leaders, including Vice President Kamala Harris, that are, by all accounts, in a position to have a much better chance of beating Donald Trump. If this is an existential election, as the Democratic Party repeats, as we believe, then you need to have the strongest possible ticket. And President Joe Biden, who I support all of his achievements as president, has a 37% approval rating. He's 20 points under. That's historically unpopular. He was behind consistently in polls before the debate. Now he's even more behind in every swing state poll. There are 3/4 of American voters say that they don't believe that he has the cognitive health to serve another 4 years as president. And he has made very clear that he's not up to the challenge of doing the basic performance tasks that we need any presidential nominee to be able to do: live interviews, debates. I mean, when you're behind, as we are right now, as we were even before you need to be able to do 10 interviews a day. You need to go out on podcasts, on YouTube. That is not happening. And any of our other options would be able to prosecute a much stronger case against Donald Trump.
Okay. Antoine, you wanted to get in there.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just have to respectfully disagree.
Antoine has frozen.
Notice that John and Kamala Harris present the strongest case, if you will, in terms of helping Democrats up and down the ballot. As Democrats, there should be a lesson that we learned in 2016. Where I'm from in South Carolina, we said there's no education in the second kick of the mule. When we were not united as Democrats in 2016, the extremists won the election. They put 3 right-wing activists on the nation's highest court for the next 30 to 40 years, and the residue from that is still feeling itself downstream today if you look at the recent activity from this court. And so at the end of the day, millions of people decided that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris should be our nominee in 2024. We are the party who believes in free and fair elections. We are the party who believes that when voters cast their vote, like the majority of African Americans did in the 2024 primary season, that we should respect the will of the people. The will of the people means that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are united, and we need to charge forward with a united front, because the country cannot afford Trump or Trumpism to govern this country in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, Aaron, Antoine's video froze there for a second, but it sounds like he is consistently saying the division is more harmful to the Democrats than the doubts. What are your thoughts there?
Well, first of all, let's be very clear, because this line that Biden's camp has been using, that there's no democratic legitimacy to him stepping aside, is so breathtakingly cynical and dishonest. We did not have a free and open democratic process. First, there was an all hands on deck. Any candidate of substance from running. There were states that canceled their primaries. If you live in Florida, you didn't even get to cast a sham ballot. And of course, there were no debates. Excuse me. Okay, I finish. There were no debates. I don't know how anyone can credibly argue that if Democrats last fall had seen a debate performance like that President Biden would have won a single primary. We were kept material information from us. And now we still have a path. You're talking about division. We still have time to unite around a Democratic ticket, including Vice President Kamala Harris. We still have time to select a nominee that is not historically unpopular, that 3/4 of Americans don't believe doesn't have the cognitive health to be president, and that has the ability to perform as a nominee. We can do this. We don't need to resign ourselves to the Trump presidency. Trump is historically unpopular. We can win.
Well okay, Antoine, go ahead.
Well, let me say this. I think it's intellectually dishonest. That means lying in my neighborhood for you to say we did not have a legitimate primary process. Millions of people, including my home state of South Carolina that led this process, came out in handsome form to demonstrate their support for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. If someone else believed that those two should not be on the ballot, they would have put their name on the line and ran and would have had the same thing happen as it did with the other two candidates who inserted themselves in the primary process. So I don't think we need to repeat 2016 because we heard this narrative about the 2016 primary. It was laid out for Hillary. It wasn't a true process. All that's bullshit. The fact of the matter is 14 million people decided that these are supposed to be our nominees. We need to be united because the threats that we face on the other side are far more greater than the disagreements we may appear to have amongst each other within our party.
Absolutely. And that, I want to be very clear. Everyone, every Democrat that has found the courage to step up against incredible pressure from the White House on down to speak truth to power right now and say we need a new nominee, every one of us has done it because we are terrified, because we understand the existential threat of this election. And when you have an existential election, you need a nominee that can string words together, that is not historically unpopular, that people have faith in their basic cognitive ability, and that can perform.
Okay, Antoine?
Well, let me ask you, Aaron, let me ask you this question. So you're going to judge a presidency and a candidacy based on a 90-minute debate when the option is the other side, when they are united around a convicted felon with all the things that come along with Donald Trump, you want to have this inter-party discussion at this point in the process? Like, what's more important to you? Making sure we win the election or having some fantasy land conversation about
the only thing that is important. The only thing that is important to everyone who is raising concerns right now is to make sure that we win the election by not having a historically flawed candidate who right now, everyone who can read a poll and understands politics is saying has
because he had a bad
winning. We're not, and to be clear, we're not judging based on a 90-minute debate. After Biden's debate, top Democrats in Congress gave him a test. They said, we need you to do a series of live unscripted interviews to show that you're fit. Biden has failed to be able to. He did 2 scripted interviews. And by the way, the woman who did one of those interviews lost her job because of that. She's being held to a higher standard than the president of the United States. He cheated on that test. He has failed in every other interview, the George Stephanopoulos interview, in which he said that if Donald Trump loses, he'll be fine as long as he thinks he did his best, undercutting the entire argument of the Democratic Party that we're not going to be fine. Donald Trump.
Can I just jump in for 1 second? Because I wanted to let you go because this is the debate that's happening inside the Democratic Party right now. So, Antoine, you're both.
Inside our party.
Pardon me?
You said the key words inside our party.
Right.
Meanwhile, the convicted felon in this party get a free pass.
Look, the Republicans are their own thing right now under Trump. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. But Antoine,
can I just say, I think it's something actually to celebrate that the Democratic Party is not a cult like the Republican Party, that we don't have slavish devotion to our leader, even if they are leading us down a path of destruction. That's something to celebrate.
Right, but Antoine, like this debate happening inside the party, in the time we have left, I want to get your thoughts. I want to get to Aaron on this too. What is this doing to the party? I mean, the concern is about the down ballot races. If Biden continues and is unable to, it hurts the down ballot race. You could lose the Senate, slip further in the House. The Supreme Court is what the Supreme Court is. So, just Antoine, what does this all do to the Democratic Party right now, as close to the election?
Well, it fractures the bone. In fact, it splits the bone, and we cannot limp into the fall with the most consequential election in most of our lifetime. Look, I believe that politics is a relationship game. We should respect the words and thoughts of our partner. However, at the end of the day, politics is also a game of multiplication and addition, not subtraction or division. And the math problem we will have if we're not united going into the fall is that we could lose the election, which means generations of people will fail. And in my community, that means 4, 5, or 6 generations will be set back.
Okay, I appreciate that. Aaron, I'll give you the last 30 seconds we have in this segment. I mean, what is this all going to do to the party if you don't resolve this soon?
I mean, Democrats in Congress are freaking out right now because the polls are clear that President Biden is headed not just for an enormous defeat, but he's going to drag down Democrats down ballot. This is not a Democratic problem. We've won special elections as Democrats. We have senators in swing states who are polling 12 points and more above Joe Biden. This is the problem of a specific nominee, and we can fix that problem. We have a qualified Black woman as vice president who could run and prosecute a powerful case against Donald Trump, and we have other options as well. Okay. We have an opportunity to make sure that we have the best fighting chance to beat this existential threat to our democracy, to our livable planet, and the fact that people are just sleepwalking into defeat right now it's unfathomable to me, and thousands of Democrats across the country are making calls, are taking action to try to stop this train.
Okay, I got to jump in. We are out of time. I do not want to cut you off. I will invite you both to come back at a future date when we get some clarity and develops where this is going. I want to thank you both, Antoine Seawright and Aaron Regenberg. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.